Hello, welcome to week 7 of this particular program, in which we will look at the internship design for engineering education. In the first lecture, we will look at the foundations of internship design. Let's try to understand what are internships. Internships can be viewed as a period of work experience which is offered to students by organizations, typically industry organizations. Internships can be paid or unpaid because there are different models in which the companies operate. So there could be specific programs of internships wherein they will the primary goal is to give them work experience and work exposure, but without necessarily resulting in any payment of a stipend and so on. Internships were originally intended for the medical profession in order to give them practical experience of treating real patients based on the education that they received as part of the medical school. But then it has become the norm for various professional qualifications, including engineering. In fact, this is something that we also see quite frequently, say in the chartered accountancy, which is also a professional certification. We do have to understand some subtle differences between internship and apprenticeship, although both of them, the goal of both of them remains providing practical experience. There is a subtle difference between internship and apprenticeship, right? For one thing, the internships are generally short-term duration. It could be as short as 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, and so on. And whereas apprenticeship is generally much longer. And in many places, apprenticeship is tied to employment itself. So, in other words, what they will do is that they will actually offer employment to the student much closer to the graduation time. And so they will say that you will serve as an intern, as an apprentice for 2 years, 3 years, and eventually that will get translated into employment. Whereas internship offer is not generally linked directly with the job guarantee on that one. So that is a subtle difference. But given that, when we talk about the engineering education in particular, it is the internships that is an integral part of engineering curriculum and not apprenticeship. In fact, most recently, the UGC has made it possible to offer apprenticeship-driven degree programs as well. So that will be a separate discussion. Whereas in this particular course and in this particular week in particular, we will focus only on the internship part of it. We need to appreciate why internships matter, right? Because we conduct a significant amount of time in the classroom teaching the students all the necessary concepts of various subjects. In fact, it is not just limited to one particular subject, but we have the entire curriculum, right? If you look at a typical 4-year engineering curriculum, right? So we are talking about doing coursework for much of the 4 years, right? So which means nearly 7 semesters of coursework is what the students do. So even if you consider about 5 courses every semester, so we are talking about anywhere between 35 to 40 courses that they are doing. But the critical part is that all those 35 to 40 courses are being conducted inside the classroom. Well, inside the confines of the institution, let me put it that way. It may be a classroom, it may be a lab, but at the end of the day, it is still within the institution, right? So, which means that much of the knowledge that they are gaining within the walls of the confines of the institution needs some amount of validation and practice, which is outside, which is extending beyond the boundaries of the institution. So, that is where the internship concept kicks in, and this is where it gives an opportunity for students to actually hone their practical skills by solving real problems. The second goal of internships is to build professional competencies and industry awareness. Right, so these competencies and industrial awareness comes only from the field, and it is not possible to create an environment within the confines of the institution which will simulate or even replicate the industrial environment. That is not possible, right? Because education institutions are not in the business of the industry itself, right? So our job is as educationists is to prepare them to go out there and start experiencing and start delivering the responsibilities that is expected of a professional. So those professional competencies will come only outside, not within the confines of the institution. Okay, so that is where we actually rely on the industry to prepare the students with those additional competencies and additional awareness that are required, right? So most often this includes the ability to communicate, the ability to even write and speak and work in a team, no, and so on. And this is where we talk about the so-called soft skills, right? So the soft skills take a lot of precedence, because when a student enters the industrial environment, it is assumed that they are good with the technical skills of whatever the institution has taught, because they go through their own selection process, shortlisting process, and so on. So beyond a point, they will assume that the students have the necessary technical skills. But it turns out that in order to actually deliver solutions in the industry, mere technical skills are not good enough. Okay, so you need soft skills in real workplace environments. What are some of those soft skills, right? The ability to speak, the ability to communicate over email, the ability to make presentations in front of 10 people, right? And working in a team, how do you divide the work, right? Especially in an education setting, possibly the students are there in a little bit of a competitive environment. But when you go into the industry, it is all about collaboration and teamwork, which is something that they have to learn. So that can be made available only in an internship setting. Okay, and another benefit, specifically from a student's point of view, also is to explore, right? Because when somebody goes for an internship, it is a mutual understanding that that particular arrangement is not a permanent thing. It is time bound for whatever period, but it is limited and time bound, and it is typically short term. So this particular short term thing is a period of exploration for the student for sure. So suddenly you get an internship opportunity, say in the finance industry. Okay, so this gives an opportunity for the student to understand what is the finance industry all about, what is the manufacturing industry all about, right? So there are so many sectors that are out there where technology is playing a very central role. We have healthcare, we have education, we have manufacturing, right? So we have banking and finance. So so across this whole spectrum of industries, so what happens is the internships will allow the student to get a taste of one of them. Obviously, it is not practical for us to give a student internship in 10 different internship opportunities, right? So there is a way to do a limited way, do that in a limited way. Nevertheless, a specific internship indeed is an opportunity for the student to explore that particular domain, that particular industry. Interestingly, this is also an opportunity for the industry to explore and understand the student who is doing internship, right? Because from their point of view, all they see in front is their mark sheet and possibly the results of some interview that they conducted and maybe some written test that they conducted. But beyond that, their value is visible only when they are assigned tasks, and they will evaluate how well they are doing those tasks which are relevant to that organization, to that specific project to which they have been assigned. So it works as a exploration and what we call as a matchmaking operation for both the employer as well as the student. So the bottom line here is experiential learning. Okay, the goal of internship, if you want to summarize it in one word, it is to provide experiential learning through experience, right? Because we are not saying no learning through success. So with that particular experience the student is gaining, we are not really specifically saying whether it is a success or a failure and so on, because we all know as educators and teachers is that even in failures there is learning. So we are not necessarily targeting that the students when they are during the internship period that they will only succeed. That is not really what we want to look at. Obviously it is very fair to expect that they will only succeed once they become employees of an organization. So even from an organization's perspective, so it is fair to say that they do expect that a little bit of learning curve will be there. A few fumbles here and there is acceptable as an intern, whereas they may not be as tolerant for a full-time employee to be making mistakes, but they will be prepared. They will have systems in place to absorb minor fumbles and failures as an intern. So this is eventually part of an experiential learning which is mutually beneficial both to the student and the industry. So who are the key stakeholders? Of course, students are central to this whole internship program. They are the ones who are seeking practical exposure and honing of their skills, fine-tuning of the skills that they already have, and obtain and seeking clarity in their career path, right? So when you talk about the clarity in the career path, it could there could be many dimensions that we are looking at. It could be the industry sector in which they are trying to move, or it could be the nature of the work that they could be moving, right? If you are looking for a software, if you are working as a software intern, now within the software itself there's a whole spectrum of activities that the intern could be doing. They could be doing coding, they could be doing support, they could be doing testing, right? So there are so many different dimensions associated with that experience itself, and that will help give some clarity to the students. And the next important stakeholder obviously are the industry partners. Okay, and what is their interest in this whole internship program? This is an opportunity for them to look at fresh talent. Okay, and this is an opportunity for innovation as well, because as I said, when it comes to internships, organizations are also prepared to take a little bit of risk, and so that is where they will use interns to try out new things, to innovate a few things, because much of the work that the interns are doing may or may not directly contribute to their final product of the organization, whatever is it that they are doing. Correct? So this might as well be an excellent platform for the organizations to bring in fresh talent and use their innovation, the innovative ideas, try it out without the fear of failure. So that also becomes a great playground for the organizations as well, and for the industry. Eventually, those who really rise up to the challenge, they can also get elevated to future employment as well. As an academic institution, so what is the relevance of internship? One is the definitely direct opportunity to strengthen the relevance of the curriculum to meet industry needs, right? That is something we as academicians are frequently accused of, saying that we don't produce, education institutions don't produce industry-ready students, right? So, in order to overcome that particular challenge, it is a difficult thing to do, because it is easy to say that education institutions do not produce industry-ready students, but we also have to appreciate the fact that education institutions do not have the environment of an industry. So this is where setting up that industry partnership is in the best interests of the institutions also, to protect themselves and prepare themselves to meet the industry requirements. So, because at the end of the day, why do people join a particular engineering program at a specific institution? At the end of the day, much of the success of the program is also determined based on employment outcomes that the institution is able to provide. So it is very much in the interest of the academic institutions to set up a very strong internship program for strengthening their curriculum relevance to the industry. One should also note that considering the importance of internship, this is also becoming a regulatory compliance as far as the norms for AICTE and UGC is concerned. Now, this is very much an integral part of the official curriculum as well. So, academic institutions are now obligated to accommodate internships in their curriculum. Let's briefly look at the dimensions of internship design. So, when you're designing an internship program, both from as an academic institution, which is for the benefit of the industry, how do you go about it? So, the main dimensions are to set up the goals and outcomes of the internship program, what is the structure and timeline, mentoring and support, assessments, and innovation and adaptation. Okay, let's take a closer look at each one of them. Right? Goals for the internship. Okay. So the goals are driven by the POs and program outcomes and program specific outcomes for engineering education. Right. So all education institutions are now mandated to be driven by POs and PSOs, by AICTE, by NBA, by NAC, and so on. So everywhere we are supposed to be very clear in our mind what are the outcomes that we want to achieve as part of our programs. Okay. Now, for example, if you look at some of the program outcomes that we generally see, right? So we want them to be able to apply the acquired engineering knowledge. We want them to be able to analyze complex engineering problems, design and development of solutions to problems, sustainable architecture for commercial buildings, which could be a program-specific outcome for, say, civil engineering, or building embedded systems for agricultural domains. So that can be a program-specific outcome of maybe an ACE program or an CSE program and so on, right? So we have to derive these goals based on our POs and PSOs. In particular, we should not draw these goals in isolation. That is the point that I wanted to make here. Of course, the overarching goal is to provide practical exposure to the students. There is no doubt about it. So, which means that they should be able to relate the foundational concepts that they learned, the theoretical concept that they learned in the classroom, and making sure that that they are able to apply. If you recall, even in terms of the Bloom's taxonomy that we are all very familiar with, right? The engineering undergraduate education generally, 90%, if not more, is covered by the remember, understand, and apply, right? So keeping that in mind, so the remember and understand parts of it happens in the classroom, and the true achievement of the apply part of the Bloom's taxonomy happens out there as part of the internship. Okay, so because in that process, that is where they will also try to understand the practical challenges of implementing many things. Okay, I have seen many cases where in the classroom we talk about, for example, if you are talking about some kind of a distributed system, right? You talk about a shop floor management, and then there are robots that are there, in the shop floor. And then you say that I want to control those robots sitting in a control room over the internet, sitting in some central office. Then you say that these factories are in a remote location. Now it is good to talk about it in a slide. Then you show the central control room, say, operating from a big city, and then you have a remote location, a factory in a remote location, and then you show a nice drawing saying that over the internet, I will send commands to the manufacturing machines that are out there, to the shop floor. Now, this is good on paper, right? We can talk about all the theoretical, how much of bandwidth will be required and so on. But when you go out there in the field, suddenly you will notice that the student will notice that the internet bandwidth is barely 2 Mbps. Now, if there is a lot of data that is expected to be moving, whatever idea that we conveyed as part of the classroom, that immediately loses its practical relevance, right? So these are all the challenges that they will learn only when they go out there. So this overall goal is anyway there, but in order to make it compliant with the regulatory authorities, it is important to align them to the POs and PSOs. So what would be the objectives of internships? Okay, so when you talk about goals versus objectives, goals broadly set the larger context. Now, specific objectives of internship. So these objectives, keeping this overall goal in mind, they help us track the progress of the students towards those goals, right? For example, if we have said that we want them to be able to apply acquired engineering skills, then we have to draw specific objectives which can help us see if they have acquired the skills to apply whatever they have learned. So an interesting question is, who defines the objectives for internships? Specifically, we talked about the three stakeholders. Who are those three stakeholders? We talked about the students, we talked about the industry, and then we talked about the institutions. These are the key participating stakeholders, right? Take a moment to think, who defines the objectives of these internships? Is it the students? Is it the institution? Or is it the industry which is offering the internship? The objectives themselves vary from internship to internship, right? And it is the organization that is offering the internship that sets the objectives. Okay, so that we have to be clear. We as education institution, I'm assuming all the participants here are also academicians. So as part of an academic institutions, we cannot set the objectives of the internships. Okay, so in other words, we cannot dictate to the industry, because at the end of the day, it is the industry which is offering the internship. We cannot dictate to the industry saying that, okay, as per the Bloom's taxonomy, the students are expected to understand how to apply this particular skill that they have learned on DevOps in project. So you please give me DevOps projects. No, that it doesn't work that way, right? So it is really varying across, it varies across the internship programs to internship programs. It definitely varies across organizations to organizations. We have to remember that it is the organization's prerogative to really define the objective of this particular internship. It is more of an, it is driven from inside, right? Now, so you may be wondering, in that case, doesn't the institution have any role to play? Do we have any say at all? Well, it is not that much of a one way. We should, what we should do as an education institution is to provide full visibility about the programs to the organizations. Okay, because it is in our own interest to help them set objectives which are likely to succeed, which are likely to be achieved by our own students who are spending time in those organizations, right? So at the very least, we should make sure that we share very detailed syllabus of our programs, curriculum of our programs, maybe even put a presentation together about the strengths of our students, of our programs who are coming to them for their internship. So what they will do, of course, it is not going to change the way they do the selection of the students and so on, but at least it will ensure that they don't their expectations are set and aligned to what the students are expected to be able to do. It's a different matter. As an institution, you may say that we in our curriculum we provide proficiency on these particular skills. It's a different matter whether the specific student has attained those skills or not. So that is a different matter altogether. Okay, so at least what we will be able to do is to protect the institution from being told, saying that your students don't know anything, right? So we can avoid such blanket statements by being more transparent about our own strengths and weakness, specifically the strengths, right? Obviously there is no need to focus on the limitations that we have, but specifically you say in a proactive manner, saying that these are the strengths that we have tried to incorporate into our programs, and our students are prepared for the kind of challenges that the industry is expected to throw, right? Which also means that it allows, I have seen many organizations when they look at the resume of the student, which is more or less reflects the work that they did in the institution. And the mentors in the organization, they carve out specific internship projects which is aligned with what the student is able to do eventually. Just to summarize this first lecture, we have seen that internships form a very important cornerstone for any professional program, and for engineering programs in particular. With the number of opportunities that are out there, it is a very important activity in any engineering curriculum. We also saw that we have to keep in mind the needs of multiple stakeholders, right? We specifically saw that we have to take care of the requirements for the students and the industry, because they are the key main stakeholders. But as an institution, the institution also plays an important role in structuring these internships. And the goals and objectives have to be very carefully articulated. And it is not something that the same set of goals and objectives will be applicable across institutions, across internships, and across the industry partners. In the next lecture, we'll look at the additional dimensions associated with the internship design.